Hello everyone and welcome to another video on our own devices. I'm MSA, and longtime viewers will recall that a little while ago I made a video covering civilian gas masks intended for use during wartime. Well, today we're going to be looking at something similar but a little bit different, which is a gas mask intended for civilian use during peacetime. This is a mine safety appliance, or MSA, all-service gas mask type N. This is intended for use by miners, firefighters, and other personnel who have to work in environments with a lot of toxic contaminants in the air, but at concentrations low enough to not warrant the use of a self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA. Now, this particular design was patented in 1921, and the mask itself was manufactured in 1958. And the company that produced it, Mine Safety Appliances Company, or MSA Safety, still exists. They're based out of a suburb of Pittsburgh, and they have quite an interesting company history. So MSA was founded in 1913 in response to the March 26, 1912 Jed mining disaster in West Virginia, in which a methane gas explosion led to the deaths of 80 miners. So in the wake of this tragedy, two mining engineers, John Ryan and George Deek, founded a company to produce safety equipment and hopefully reduce casualties in the industry going forward. And they teamed up with none other than Thomas Edison, who produced a lightweight storage battery and electric headlamp, which could be easily worn by a miner, but did not run the risk of igniting flammable gases. And interestingly enough, Edison would later state that of his hundreds of inventions, the safety lamp was the one which he considered to have contributed the most to humanity. And this product proved extremely successful. By 1916, there were 70,000 of them in use all across the United States. And over the next 25 years, the rate of mining explosions fell by 75%. Now, MSA would continue to be a great innovator in the field of safety equipment. For example, in the early 1930s, they produced one of the world's first standardized mass-produced hard hats, known as the Skull Guard, and this was made out of fiber-reinforced bakelite. They also created something called the Chem-Ox rebreather, which is a type of oxygen rebreather set that was distinctive for not having any compressed gas cylinders. Instead, this consisted of a canister of potassium superoxide, which reacts with the moisture in the user's breath to generate oxygen. It then acts at the same time as a carbon dioxide scrubber, and this allows the entire unit to be very lightweight and compact. Now, I would love to have a look at one of these on this channel if I can get my hands on one. And today, MSA continues to produce a wide variety of safety equipment, including breathing apparatus, gas analyzers, thermal cameras, communication systems, and body armor. Right, so let's actually have a closer look at this gas mask, beginning with the box, which is made out of heavy-duty cardboard with metal reinforcements. We have a nice big label on the front indicating the manufacturer and the model number. So as I said, this is known as an all-service gas mask type N, at least in civilian service. This is also sold to a number of militaries, including that of the United States. And in US military service, this would be known as the Navy ND Mark V mask or the M10 mask. And the Navy mainly used these for firefighting and damage control, or as an escape mask. So for example, if you were working in a confined space like a gun turret and a fire broke out, you would put one of these on to filter out any toxins in the air for long enough to get out of that space. Right, so the label also gives all the conditions under which this mask is intended to be used. Unfortunately, that part of the label is worn off, but that information is reproduced on the label on the filter canister. So as you can see, this is intended for use in an atmosphere containing not less than 16% oxygen. And this makes a lot of sense because this doesn't supply any additional breathing oxygen, meaning it can't be used in atmospheres that would otherwise be unbreathable, even if all the toxic contaminants were filtered out. And although today miners will typically use a sophisticated gas analyzer, the traditional method for determining whether an atmosphere is breathable outside of the classic canary in the coal mine is using a safety lamp like this one, which we've already covered in a previous video. But briefly, this has a mesh screen over it that acts as a flame arrestor, which prevents the flame inside the lamp from igniting flammable gas in the atmosphere. However, the gas can still get through the mesh and interact with the flame. And if the flame brightens, that indicates the presence of a flammable gas. But if the flame dims or goes out, that indicates that the atmosphere is not breathable. The The mask is also rated for atmospheres containing not less than 3% organic vapors or acid gases, which includes carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen sulphide, and not less than 3% ammonia, or 2% of all contaminants if multiple are present. And then finally, this has a particulate filter, which is rated for dust, mists, fogs, and smokes up to 0.1 milligrams per meter cubed, or 2.4 million particles per foot cubed. Right, so if we open up the box, we'll see that on the inside of the lid, we have a handy instruction label, which gives instructions on how to properly assemble, don, and take care of the mask. It also lists all of the part numbers, which is useful if you want to order spares. It also lists the patent numbers associated with this particular design, which was very useful for putting together this video. And finally, in this corner here, we have an ink stamp indicating that this was manufactured in 1958. At the bottom, we have two compartments for holding the mask and the canister and its holder. And in one of these, you'll see this very mangled piece of cardboard. That used to be a form over which the mask would be draped in storage in order to hold its shape. But this has been severely damaged with age. Right, so moving over to the mask itself, we have two very large eyepieces, at least compared to World War I and World War II era gas masks. In 1959, MSA would release the Model S, which had a large clear faceplate known as the Clearview, and the Model S was also fitted with something called a speaking diaphragm, which allowed you to be more easily heard when speaking with the mask on, but this one doesn't have that. Right below the eyepieces is a flapper-style exhalation valve. We saw a lot of those on the masks we looked at in my previous video on civilian World War II gas masks. Only in this case, that flapper valve is protected from damage by this little metal cage. This has a 5-strap head harness with ratcheting rubber straps, and the instructions in the case and also on the back of the harness indicate that the top strap has to be tightened last when donning the mask. And on the back here, we have a bunch more information, including the patent information revealing that this was patented on November 1st, 1921 by one R.P. Mays. Now, looking inside the mask, we can see that the inlets for filtered air are right below the eyepieces, and that's so that the air flows over the inside of the eyepieces and prevents them from fogging up, which is a really neat design feature. And if we go to the end of the breathing hose, we find this adapter, which threads onto the filter canister, and this also incorporates an interesting device, typically known as a timer, but probably more correctly described as a breathing odometer. This measures the number of breaths you take, and thus more crudely, the volume of air traveling through the filter, thus allowing you to estimate when the filter has become saturated and needs to be replaced. So how you would use this is before entering a toxic environment, you would unthread the bezel. You would then loosen up this nut and move the needle back to the 0 position. Now, taking this whole thing apart, we can see how this works. Every time you breathe in, this little flap is going to be drawn up, and it's going to drive this ratchet and pull mechanism, which via a worm gear is going to drive the pointer around the dial. And this is marked 0, 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4, just to give you an idea of how much time is left in the cartridge. And you'll notice that each of those numbers is marked with a little painted spot. I will bet you anything that that is luminous radium paint for use in dark environments. And then finally, we get to our filter canister. And this one has never been used. It has all of its original seals and storage caps. And while the mask was manufactured in 1958, according to the label, the canister was issued in 1971. And this makes sense, as the mask can be used over and over again over a period of years, whereas the canisters have to be replaced effectively after every use. And this is what's known as a type N filter or universal filter, meaning that it is rated to filter out multiple different contaminants at the same time, rather than only one or the other. However, this increased flexibility typically comes at the cost of shorter service life, since each filter element for each different contaminant is smaller and thus lasts a shorter amount of time, meaning that these cartridges have to be replaced on a more regular basis. Now, this is intended to be worn on your chest, and for that purpose comes supplied with this handy harness. So the canister laces in, and you have two straps, one that goes over your neck and one that goes around your back. Now, I don't have a diagram showing the specific arrangement of filter elements within this particular cartridge, but I do have one for a generic type N cartridge, which is likely very similar to what is inside here. So first, there are going to be 2 or more layers of particulate filters for filtering out dust and smoke. These are typically made out of compressed fiberglass or cotton wool that has been treated with resin. And this imparts an electrostatic charge to the filter, meaning that it doesn't just filter out the smoke particles, it also attracts them and traps them in place. Next is the system for scrubbing out carbon monoxide. And this is quite interesting because it consists of a material known as hopcalite, which is a mixture of manganese and copper oxides that catalyzes the reaction between carbon monoxide and oxygen to produce carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is very easily scrubbed out of the airstream using a layer of sodium hydroxide, which also serves to scrub out other acid gases, including hydrogen sulfide and any carbon dioxide that happens to already be in the atmosphere. However, the catalytic action of hopcalite is poisoned by the presence of moisture, meaning that the canister must also include several layers of desiccant in order to keep the catalyst dry. And this is typically composed of silica gel. Now, of course, over time, the silica gel is going to become saturated and the catalyst is going to degrade. And so to indicate to the user when the cartridge has become saturated, you have a little indicator window at the front, which is manufactured under the trade name Windowcator. And so you have a reference strip that stays the same color, and then you have a test strip on the other side. And when the color of the two match, it is time to change out the filter. And this is almost certainly composed of a piece of blotting paper soaked in a solution of cobalt chloride, which is very commonly used as a moisture indicator in desiccant packages or in test strips for use in environments where humidity must be carefully controlled. Now, interestingly, the silica gel in this particular canister actually pulls double duty in that it also serves as the scrubber for ammonia. Now, typically, the standard absorbent material in a gas mask is activated carbon or activated charcoal. But according to one of the patents associated with this mask, activated carbon doesn't work very well with ammonia. Not only does it not absorb a lot of it, but it also tends to gradually release whatever ammonia it absorbs. This means that the traditional way of filtering out ammonia is to use kieselguhr, which is a type of diatomaceous earth, most famously used in the manufacture of dynamite, soaked in concentrated sulfuric acid. However, in 1931, a pair of chemists working for MSA, George Parrott and Max Jablik, discovered that ordinary silica gel was far more effective as an ammonia adsorbent than the traditional kieselguhr and sulfuric acid. And this became MSA's standard system going forward and allowed their cartridges to be a lot smaller and lightweight. And finally, this will include a layer of activated carbon to filter out any remaining contaminants, including organic vapors. Now, as I said before, the trade-off with having a universal filter canister is that it doesn't last very long. These tend to last between 45 minutes and 2 hours, depending on the concentration of contaminants in the atmosphere. And this is because each individual filter layer is relatively small, and one of them is going to become saturated before the other. So even if the rest of the filter still has some life in it, you have to throw it out because you're going to be poisoned by whatever contaminant has saturated the filter first. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. I came across this actually in a local flea market and picked it up on a whim. And after doing a little bit of research, I realized that the engineering and chemistry behind this was a lot more fascinating than I had originally assumed. So I hope you found it just as interesting as I did. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time on another video or look at yet more safety equipment and other fascinating devices just like this one. Until then, I'm Julian Horn from Our Own Devices. Have a great day.